So hello, my name is Ian Moore. I'm the guide for the official Shipyard Girls walking tour and various other tours of Sunderland. Topics include music scene of the 1960s, lost cinemas, lost shops and all sorts. Today I want to talk about architecture in Sunderland. Not in any highfalutin way, but we're going to look at famous buildings and streets past and present. Mainly in this part of the town, which is becoming increasingly known as the Sunniside sector. If you came here in 1800, there was nothing to see, basically, it was just fields. But a local family called the Faucets, mainly John Faucet, they had the scheme to build a nice posh housing estate, because at that time Sunderland was much smaller. Sunderland was basically down High Street along by the river, down to the town moor in that area. There was, of course, another settlement towards Bishop Weymouth, where the Minster is, and across the river in the Barbary Coast area, and going much further away to the distant village of Southwick or Suddick, which wasn't part of Sunderland until the 20th century, actually, as you probably know. So, the streets we know now as Faucet Street behind me here, John Street, Frederick Street, Faucet Street, West Sunniside and Norfolk Street. These are all part of this great plan of John Faucet and company. The architect they used was a guy called William Jameson, who was commemorated in the pub behind us. It's the only pub in Sunderland that people queue up in. It's quite nice, actually. So as I mentioned, the area was designed to be residential only, and the shops didn't start to arrive until the 20th century. The first commercial building in Faucet Street was this one just behind us. Okay, it was part of Wilko, and then before that was part of Binns, which closed in 1993. But when they built it in the 1870s, it was the gas company, Sunderland Gas Company, and it was the gas company with a different name right up until quite recently. The whole side of the street and this side of the street were badly damaged by the Luftwaffe in 1941, so there might have been a fair bit of rebuilding going on there. But the architect, George Hoskins, he was the same architect who designed Victoria Hall, which is about 200 yards away from here, where the terrible disaster was in 1883. So the whole estate is designed by William Jameson, was constructed between about 1815 and 1840. And one building that opened at the same time was the one across the street, the Athenaeum. So you're probably acquainted with Athenaeum Street, which is the next street. So the Athenaeum, it looked very different in those days. It had a beautiful columned portico on the front, which was later removed at the end of the century. So it was built for the Sunderland Literary and Philosophical Society, the Lit and Phil, which actually has been revived just recently. So if you want to be a member, all the details are online. It initially housed a museum, but after a while, it was too small for the museum's purposes. So the museum as we know it now, which is currently undergoing renovation, was opened in 1876. And the building, basically, it's the same building with a different facade. And if you're around in the 60s, 70s, you remember there'll be shops along here. There was a record shop, I think it was where the gallery is there, called Gordon Eads. Don't know if you remember it, but I used to go to Atkinson's around the corner, actually. But one of my friends, he was telling us, 1965, he came down to buy a Bob Dylan album, and he spent his very last penny, and he had to walk all the way back to Grindon, but he was so pleased. He walked back clutching his Dylan album. But one building we have to talk about, which a lot of people lament the passing of, was just behind me where that white building is now. I'm talking, of course, about the town hall. So it opened in 1890. It was designed by a bloke called Brightwin Binion, which is a fantastic name. And it was done in what they called an Italianate style. And it closed with much controversy in 1971 and was subsequently demolished. Now, the ins and outs of why it was closed are much debated, but apparently it was deemed too small, and they constructed the new civic centre up Borough Road there. There was talk about them building a hotel to replace it, but that never materialised. So for 3 or 4 years, we had basically a big hole in the ground which filled with water, and you could walk through there when it wasn't full of water. The kids liked skateboarding there. And eventually, they built Casserton House, which is there now. So you might recognise where we are. We're still in Faucet Street. I want to talk about these two beautiful buildings behind me here. So if you've got good eyesight, you can see the names on the top. This is Corder House and Sydenham House. So these were constructed 1889 to 1891. The style's called Neo-Moorish, and they were designed by an architect called Frank Cause, who also designed the Elephant Tea Rooms not far down the road there. So Corder House was occupied by a draper's company. I don't really know what happened in Sydenham House. Perhaps somebody could leave a comment and let us know. It's funny, I don't know how many thousands of times I walked down Faucet Street. I don't think I noticed these buildings until about 10 years ago. They're in a bit of a sorry state of disrepair at the moment, with plants growing all over them. But I think they are on some kind of list for future renovation if a nice grant comes along. You may recall downstairs there was a very posh tea rooms called Mengs. Now, I never went in, it closed in 1953, the year before I was born. But it was a very high-class place. If you read the Shipyard Girls books, it gets a couple of mentions in there when two of the girls go out on a posh date. So if John Faucet was alive now, he'd be hard-pushed to recognise any of Faucet Street, really, because it's been drastically changed. I'm just wondering whether these two buildings here are part of the original street, which, as I said, was residential. They're in a sorry state of repair now. I don't know who did the brickwork there, that top left window. So there's certainly room for development there. So I talked about Frank Cause just a short while ago. This is, if you don't know, it's the Elephant Tea Rooms, maybe my favourite building in Sunderland. So it was constructed between 1872 and 1877. And it was owned by a local tea merchant called William Grimshaw. Bill Greenwell's written a book all about that family, so if you're interested, you could buy that book. It's been restored in the last few years, and because in the 1960s, all of the bottom part was taken out when the bank was there, and just had big glass windows in. So this grant has replaced all the nice brickwork, not exactly as it was, but it still looks really nice and 10 times better than it was before the restoration. Okay, so just across the road from the Elephant Tea Rooms is the famous Mackey's Corner. You can still see the name on the shop there. So it was part of Hutchinson's buildings. This opened in 1845. And Mr. Mackey had a shop that made hats. And people used to stand outside and watching them making hats, like, so it was a popular thing for idle people to do. Certainly back in the day, it was a place where a lot of people met each other. They'd meet outside Mackey's, outside the town hall, or outside Books Fashions. It's been restored again recently, and I think it looks really good. This quarter of the town's really coming up. So we're in Bridge Street now, and behind me you can hear them demolishing the building that replaced another very popular building from the past, the Grand Hotel. This hotel was constructed in 1856, and it closed 1971. It was knocked down about 1974. It had 50 bedrooms, very posh buffet bar, and cocktail bars and the whole lot. If you read the Shipyard Girls books again, the horrible character Miriam, she was often in here, living it up with officers from the Army and the Air Force. The Beatles stayed here in 1963. They played in Sunderland 3 times then, in February, May and November. I think it was in the November when they were getting very, very popular. And St Mary's Church is just opposite here, it's still there. And there was an incident involving the Beatles and a local Catholic priest. And I'm pretty sure it was here. They were coming back to the hotel and they saw the priest coming out. There was some sort of altercation. John Lennon was a bit of a cheeky lad, and a few words were said. And I do believe in they tried to hush it up, like, but I think he gave the priest 10 bob for the collection. That's 50 pence in modern money. And it was all kind of smoothed over. So here we are in John Street. And this was also a big, big shopping street until quite recently. So Joplin's closed 2010 and Woolies closed 2004. But this part of the street behind me here, it retains really the essential character of the original buildings between 1815 and 1840, when it was all residential. This nice building behind us, this is the Riverway Commissioners building. And today it's a conference and business centre. So Riverway Commissioners, what did they do? Well, basically they were the organisation that created the Port of Sunderland. So if you look at the old maps, you can see before the docks, etc., and the quays were built, the mouth of the river was just full of sandbanks and lagoons and little islands. It really wasn't much use for docking ships in. So this organisation constructed the docks and the quays and dredged all the river and really made Sunderland into the vibrant port that it was. I know later on, in the 70s and 80s, it was part of the Sunderland Social Services. Another building that a lot of older people miss is Palmer's Arcade. Now, we used to run from here in St. Thomas Street all the way through to High Street over there. And it contained a myriad of shops, jewellers' shops. A lot of people bought their engagement rings and stuff there. I think there was a pet shop. It opened in 1874 and it closed I think about 1975. And it was replaced by this building, which is something to do with BT. And just over the road, there was a Palmer's store as well, which I don't remember ever going into. But I did meet Mrs. Palmer once. She used to live in Thornhill Gardens. And we ran into her when we were kids because we lived just over the way. And she came out looking for a lost cat called Rainier. I'd never heard anybody speak so posh. Apparently she was quite an eccentric old lady. And her nephew was in touch and he said she used to slide down the banisters at quite an advanced age. So she sounded a lot of fun. So we're in Frederick Street now, which is the next one towards the east from John Street. And there's a bit of debate about who these streets are named after. So Faucet Street's after John Faucet, John Street's after John Faucet. Frederick Street, there was a Frederick in the Faucet family. Some people say it was named after Frederick, Duke of York, who was Commander-in-Chief of the Army at that time. And the next street is Foyle Street. Now, a Miss Foyle got married to a relative of John Faucet, his nephew. So I think that's what Foyle Street's named after her. Anyway, you can see in Frederick Street, I think much of the original street is still here. So you can see the character of the town, how residential all this was. So these days, there's a lot of solicitors' offices and estate agents and things like that. In the past, if you heard of Ken Mackenzie's multi-chord studios, they used to be in the top floor, just near where that lamppost is there. So they recorded local acts, such as the very, very young Dave Stewart and Brass Alley, Lucas Tyson, people like that. So we're still in Frederick Street, and the main thing I remember at Frederick Street was Foster's nightclub, which was somewhere over there on the left. Now, I've asked loads of people, and nobody can remember exactly where it was, so I suggest it was probably a very nice club. There is a song by the Toy Dolls, Fisticuffs in Frederick Street, which is connected with Foster's nightclub. So here we are at Foyle Street, which looks pretty much as it did when they built it, around about 1820, 1830. Apparently they kept it this way, where they took the tarmac off to make it look really good for movies and TV. I haven't actually seen it in any movies yet, but maybe I've just missed them. Again, from the Shipyard Girls, two of the Shipyard Girls live here, and one of them lives very close by. If you want to learn more, come along on me Shipyard Girls tour sometime. So here we are in West Sunnyside, and this is Norfolk Street. So this has really retained a lot of the old character of the town. They spent quite a lot of money doing the place up, as you can see, and they do have regular festivals here. There's always some kind of food festival or something going on in the square, music festival. The building at the far end is the old post office, which a lot of people will remember. It was replaced by one in the Market Square. Now, the only big post office is where the town hall used to be, in Faucet Street. So just behind me here, I can't even see where the entrance was now. There was a little alley. It went through to Nile Street, and there was a great pub called the Post Office, later called the Windsor Castle. I saw a picture of it from the Nile Street end, and I didn't recognise it because I never went in that end. I only ever went down this alley and in the back door. And as you can imagine, it was very popular with postal workers. So behind us, you can see Diego's Joint. This is another place where a lot of different events happen. They have comedy nights, poetry nights, music nights. It's a nice bar. They do very nice vegan pizzas as well, which I can recommend.